Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into another beer from River North Brewing Company out of Denver, Colorado. And this is the final beer in this big, frankly very expensive sampler pack I got from Tavour of some of their limited release, very high ABV beers of varying styles. Their Vicennial beer series. It was at least a couple $100 for like 6, 7, 8 beers, something like that. Not cheap, but all well worth it in my humble opinion. This was the 2021 release of their beer called Father Time. It is a barley wine, barrel aged. This one clocks in at 15.8% ABV. It's worth noting they don't tell us the exact barrels, so it could be some random wood, it could be a spirit barrel, but we'll get a pretty good idea once we jump into the beer. In terms of label art, as always, it's the same dark black label with gold. This looks like almost like an old man wizard with a scythe in his hand. So that's their artist's interpretation of Father Time. And of course, this gold wax dip. So as always, we're going to get the trusty pointy end of our bottle opener. We're going to score right under the edge of that wax. This obviously a 2021 release. I have had this for a while and been aging. But all of these beers with these really high ABVs, you could age them 3, 4, 5, 6 years easy, no problem. All right, so that came right off, no problem. Let's get this right up under the edge of this cap. Actually, I need to clear up just a bit more space, so we'll probably do a little cut in the video edit here so you don't have to watch me get this finagled. There we go, right up under the edge. Wax comes right off. Now, I do want on this one, because it is kind of softer wax, I want to get the edge of where I pried up to try to get any last residual bits so it doesn't drip in my glass. Not the end of the world, it's just wax, but if I can keep it from falling in there, I like to do so. So as always, on a barley wine, we're using our stout glass, which frankly, I guess I could call it a high ABV big beer glass because it works great for barley wines. But they do make dedicated barley wine glasses, typical shape, so this works well for barley wines. Get this poured right in. Oh yeah, that's pouring this kind of classic caramelly color. This one's on the darker end of the spectrum, but it looks appropriate for the beer style, quite active in terms of carbonation. I don't expect that head to stick around, so I'm going to get right up over it to get the notes out of it I can first. Okay, it does smell of a whiskey or a bourbon barrel to my nose. Very strong aromas of spirit. I'll call it whiskey of some kind. Strong caramel, strong toffee notes, strong fig, strong plum. Yeah, this is a classic barley wine aroma here, guys. The underlying base beer itself, and certainly what I would expect to smell on a barrel-aged beer. They didn't say what the barrel was, but it smells like a spirit barrel. To my nose, it smells like whiskey. If I had to guess, I would say specifically as bourbon, because I am getting some definite underlying notes of vanilla coming off of this, which would be a lot more common in a bourbon than in a standard just non-bourbon whiskey. But I'm not getting any elements of char, which is required. American oak specifically to be classified as a bourbon, and at least 50% of the mash has to be corn. Might be 51%, so I'm close. Somewhere in that realm. I don't smell char, but you don't often get that on the nose on a bourbon regardless. So, you know, and in a big beer style like a barley wine, certainly one that's pushing 16% ABV, I'm not surprised I'm not getting all of that nuance, but it does smell like a classic barley wine aroma to me, and certainly this spirit barrel is doing its job. Yeah, as expected, the head, almost as soon as I poured it, was gone. That's why I wanted to get up over it while the head was still holding and forming and effervescing. It has already just collapsed itself from the underside. Now, what you cannot see on the camera, and I can see in the top of the glass, there is very slow, ridiculously fine carbonation that is still coming straight up the middle. And it looks like it wants to try to attempt to reform a pad, but I just think that it's so tiny and fine, it's not going to have a chance to do so. So be that as it may, that's how it turned out. This one visually, yeah, it's a dark caramelly brown. It's in the darker brown end of the spectrum, but it's not black and it's not on the lighter spectrum, but perfectly in a barley wine wheelhouse. So it smells great, it looks great. Let's just jump right in, see what this one's about. Ooh, boy. Yeah, that's a big beer. Okay. No real surprises here, but what I'm getting, I very much enjoy. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. All of these Vicennial beers I got in this collection from Tavour by River North Brewing Company have all been top tier. This is no exception. So let's talk body and mouthfeel. This is a near as close as to call it 16% ABV beer. You might be surprised to know that the body on this does not feel heavy. It's the light end, in fact, of medium heavy, so it's not as weighty as I expected, given the beer style and the ABV range, but it does have presence. It's just not as heavy as I expected. I would say for the style and the ABV, it's really just sitting in the average range. For River North, I expected it to be on the high and above average range in the properly heavy, but it's not. It's on the low end of medium heavy. So not quite as robust as I expected. The mouthfeel, on the other hand, there is a lot of resistance. You can feel just how thick this beer is. This doesn't get creamy, silky, foamy, no other notable textural kind of character traits here other than the fact you can really feel the resistance. So it's kind of an opposite and a counterbalance to the relative lack of weight given the ABV range for the beer. The mouthfeel's thickness and viscosity makes up for it. It's very nice, very thick, very full. Does a really good job of coating the flavors that are quite intense on the palate. So flavor profile, let's talk about that. The first thing you notice is no surprises at all. It really imparts a lot into the flavor profile that you get on the nose. That is very much characteristic of barley wine. Though they're so nuanced and complex, you never really know exactly what you're going to get in the flavor profile. On this one, the barrel aging comes through very clearly. It does taste like bourbon to my palate. There is a wonderful, nice warming sensation as it goes down, which, you know, some of that comes from the barrel. A lot of it comes from the fact this is nearly a 16% ABV beer. Yeah, it's a big one. And it has that nice warming sensation. You get big burst of caramel, big burst of toffee. The classic fig does come through. The classic plum does come through that I smelled on the nose. There's also bits of apricot. There's bits of kind of candied fruit like raisins, and there is a little bit of a grape quality, a little bit of a vinous quality to this one. So it's got a lot of these classic traits you might expect to find in a barley wine that are wholly appropriate for this style. Certainly more in the flavor than what you can detect on the nose, but everything you smell on the nose you get in the flavor. There's just more subtleties and nuance in the flavor profile. It's great, and it's big, and it's bold, and it's intense. And the thickness of this beer does a very good job of coating these flavors on the palate. Certainly is barrel aged as well, so that is definitely driving out the finish, as you would expect of a big barrel aged barley wine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump back in for a second sip, let it re-intensify, make sure I didn't miss any nuance, and then we're going to talk about the balance and the finish. So take two. Yeah, big burst of flavor up front, nice warming sensation. It's got a bunch of different fruit. It's the plum, it's the apricot, it's the grape, it's the raisin, all in tandem with this bourbon barrel and big notes of caramel and even bigger notes of toffee. I would say this has a lot more in the kind of English buttered toffee realm than it does caramel, but they're both distinctly different. And I make that differentiation. A lot of people maybe, what are you talking about? Aren't those the same thing? No, they're not. Buttered toffee has a very distinct flavor, and caramel, although it's related, has a distinctly different flavor. Think of those little craft cubes you could use in baking, like you would melt down and dip to make a caramel apple around, say, Halloween. Yeah, that is the flavor profile of the caramel coming out of this. The buttered toffee is distinctly buttered toffee. Think buttered toffee flavored Crunch and Munch, if you know that snack. Distinctly different flavor profiles, and they're both present here. So yeah, the big fruit side of this beer is very much that classic kind of baked good cobbler. It's got caramelized sugars. It's like, it's a dessert. It's the dessert fruit flavor forward in tandem with this nice, what I presume is bourbon barrel aging and this classic caramelly and toffee undertone to the malt bill. So really there's no surprises here, guys. This is a classic big barley wine that's barrel aged. It's pulling no punches. There's no tricks, no gimmicks. It's exactly what I expected to get. just that the mouthfeel is much more prominent than the body on this one. The body is not as robust as you would expect for the ABV. And yes, in terms of the balance on this, it's top tier. I wouldn't change a thing about it. It's a very big, nuanced, layered beer style. This is no different. It basically checks off all of the boxes. You just never really know what you're going to get in any given barley wine specimen until you jump in. This one's fantastic. What about the finish? Well, it is nearly 16% ABV. The flavor intensity is quite bold, and yes, it's barrel aged. That being said, the barrel aging on this beer, yes, it's prevalent. Yes, it brings warming. Yes, it brings other nuance of flavor and aroma to the table, but it's not as intense of barrel aging as you would find on some beers. That being said, it is still well longer than average in terms of length of finish for a typical barley wine, and I think a large part of that comes with the fact this is pushing 16%. It's very big and bold, and it is quite thick, so it does a really good job of coating these flavors all over the palate. But yes, the barrel also plays its role too. So it's top tier. So even though the barrel presence itself isn't as bold and in your face, it makes no difference in the expectation of the finish. It is very, very, very long. And this one is wet and round and full all the way to the end as you would expect. Well in excess of 2 minutes on the end of each sip. And where it ends up on this one is very much this kind of toffee and caramel flavor that lingers on the palate. And even though the intensity of the barrel isn't as prevalent on this specific beer as it is on others, the barrel is also a large part of what extends the length of this finish. So it may not be quite as intense, but its intensity holds out. It really holds out quite long, and you taste that nice spirit on the back. And it takes, if I had to put a number to it, I would guess 2.5 minutes before it really starts to whisper down to nothing. So it's very, very long, guys. This is a classic, big, bold, in-your-face barley wine. No tricks, no gimmicks. It's basically what I expected it would be, and certainly from my prior experience with these River North Vicennial beers, yeah, it met my expectations. This is another winner, guys. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, call out my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was River North Brewing Company's Father Time, the 2021 Vicennial release. This was a barley wine that clocked in at 15.8% ABV. This was barrel aged, though we don't know the specific barrels, and River North is based in Denver, Colorado. So guys, yeah, this was a very much classic barley wine recipe. No tricks, no surprises, no gimmicks. It was what it was, and this was obviously quite a high ABV, nearly 16%, as all of these River North Vicennial beer releases were. But yeah, that notwithstanding, it was very classic barley wine. Big, bold, pungent, classic barley wine aromas and flavors. The barrel, we don't know, but I would guess whiskey, and I would guess specifically bourbon. That's my guess because they didn't tell us. I looked it up online, I tried to research, I couldn't tell, but my suspicion strongly is that it's bourbon. That said, this was a great beer. It really checked off all the boxes for me. Really no surprises, kind of hit exactly where I thought that it would. And indeed, in general, it did exceptionally well across most of these categories. There were indeed only 2 that did not get a perfect score. So I will just jump to the 2 categories in question. The first of those was the body. So look, this almost 16% ABV. I expected heavy. This was really kind of on the lower end of that. It was like really maybe medium heavy if you squinted. And that to me was really just kind of low end of average for this ABV range and this beer style. I did expect a heavy body, especially on the heels of all of these other Vicennial River North beers that I had. It felt like it just lacked some oomph, some presence. You know, it is what it is, but I did give the body a 4 out of 10. The second category that did not get a perfect score was the head and retention. And guys, look, it's a barley wine. We've talked about this a million times on this channel. They're very active in terms of carbonation. This was absolutely the case on this beer, and the head just collapsed itself from the bottom up as it was forming. It formed an okay head at the start, but within 10 seconds, it was basically gone to nothing. Head and retention gets a 2 out of 10. but that does leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 8 categories. That's aroma, taste, mouthfeel, finish, appearance, balance, my subjective thoughts, and example of style. So the total score on River North Brewing Company's 2021 Vicennial release of Father Time is an 86 out of 100. So guys, yeah, well above average. And again, this is another one of those beers. Oh, 86, maybe I'll skip it. No, do yourself the favor. The body, the head and retention, they don't really have that big of a meaningful, impactful difference on what the beer drinking experience was. This was a great, classic, bold, pungent, in-your-face barley wine, packed full of nuance in both the aroma and the flavor profile. Pulled no punches, no surprises. This is one, if you're a barley wine fan, barrel-aged or otherwise, I would definitely recommend. This was classic barley wine done well. I absolutely loved it. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, toggle on that bell icon. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.